God. Welcome to today's special episode, proudly brought to you by PCA Nairobi West Health Board. Today being the World TB Day, we are privileged to have a TB specialist, Wendy Nkirote, uncover the realities of TB transmission and prevention, separating facts from myths. Stay tuned as we learn more about TB.
Hello everyone, my name is Nkirote, a member of the Health Board team at the PCA Nairobi West Church. Today I want to welcome you all in commemorating the World TB Day, which is 24th of March. Every year we commemorate the World TB Day with an aim to create an awareness on TB and be able to advance our agenda in terms of reducing the TB burden. TB remains a major public health concern globally, with close to 10.6 million people diagnosed with TB in 2022 alone. 1.6 million of these people died of TB. Yet, TB remains a preventable, treatable, and curable disease. So this is quite sad, because we do not need to have people dying with tuberculosis at this day and age. TB is a major public health concern for us as a country in Kenya, and it's actually the fourth leading cause of death among all diseases. We are among the 30 high TB burden countries globally, and also a double burden of TB and HIV. So what this means is that globally we are high ranking in terms of TB burden, which is not a good thing, because there's something we can do about it, and that's what I'm largely going to speak about today. So TB disease largely affects the most productive age group within our society. That is between the ages of 25 and to 54 years of age. And I know that's where a majority of you lie. Now, this burden is also higher amongst men compared to women. As we go along, I will be telling you why we all need to focus on this, or why men are more prone to the disease. So what is TB, or tuberculosis, au kifua kikuu? Tuberculosis is a disease, it's an infectious disease that is caused by a bacteria known as Mycobacterium tuberculosis. And this germ is spread from one person to another when you cough, sneeze, laugh, talk, or sing. So what happens is that if I have had TB and I cough unhygienically, so that means I don't cover my mouth either with an elbow or a handkerchief, I am likely to spread these bacteria from one person to another. TB largely affects the lungs, but can affect any other part of the body except the hair, the nails, and the teeth. And the reason is, it's because these areas have dead cells, so they do not have blood, so they can't maintain a bacteria. So what happens is that once you've inhaled the bacteria, it largely localizes within your lungs. And once it is in your lungs, what you're likely to get is TB of the lungs. Remember, I said TB can affect any part of the body except the nails, the hair, and the teeth. So if it localizes within your lungs, then it affects the lungs largely, and which is the most common type of TB, but it can also affect any other part of TB. So we have had TB of the bones, TB of the skin, TB of the stomach, TB of the brain, any other part of the body. What is important is to ensure that diagnosis does happen as early enough as possible. And basically with all health related issues, or all diseases for that matter, you have to get early diagnosis. And how do you get a diagnosis of TB? It depends largely on where it is localized. So if it is the TB of the lungs, and which is the most common type of TB, you will go to see a medical doctor, and the symptoms you're likely to present with are cough. It could be a cough of any duration. You could be having night sweats, soaking night sweats, where you wake up and your sheets are literally soaked in sweat. You could also have blood-stained sputum. You could have chest pains or shortness of breath. These are the most common symptoms of TB, especially TB of the lungs. Now, depending on any other part of the body that TB localizes, it may present differently, and that's why it's very important for you to visit a medical facility for proper diagnosis. For children, children largely present with what we call failure to thrive or poor weight gain, such that a child has, by the time they are going to the clinic, they have not added weight as is expected based on their age. They also have reduced playfulness and lethargy or irritability. Yani mtoto analia na kusumbua kila wakati. So how do you diagnose TB? If it is TB of the lungs, or what is the more common type of TB again, you give up sputum, kikohozi, which goes to the laboratory. It is tested, and if you're diagnosed to have TB, then you're started on treatment. You also could have chest X-ray, and chest X-rays also aid in doing screening of tuberculosis. So if it is sputum, most common tests of sputum are also able to give an indication of whether you have TB, and also if the TB you have is sensitive to the common type of drugs. And that's where we have what is called the drug-sensitive tuberculosis, which takes up to 6 months for treatment. But we also have another type of tuberculosis that is called the drug-resistant tuberculosis that takes up to 24 months to treat, which I was saying, it emanates from poor use of antibiotics, especially the anti-TBs. So if the first time you've been given TB treatment and you do not adhere to TB treatment, you may actually develop what is called the drug-resistant TB. And for that matter, actually all antibiotics, it's very important when you've been diagnosed, when you've been put on antibiotics, to ensure that you complete your entire dose of antibiotics. So for drug-resistant TB, you take up to close to 24 months. It's quite fatal. You can die if you do not adhere to treatment or if you do not seek care for treatment early enough. Most often, people think TB is not curable. And I'd want to bust additional other myths that are related to TB. Sometimes people think TB is not curable. TB is preventable, it is treatable, and it is curable. You just have to ensure that you adhere to your full course of anti-TBs until the period you've been prescribed for is finished, and you get your sputum tested, and you will be cured if only you can adhere to your TB treatment. Again, people tend to think that when you have TB, you have HIV. Well, that's not true. When you have, in a study we conducted in 2016, the TB prevalence survey actually showed that 83% of people who had TB were HIV negative. However, when you're HIV positive or you're a person living with HIV, your immunity is weakened. So you're likely to develop diseases, including tuberculosis. And actually, TB is the leading cause of death amongst people living with HIV. So when you have HIV, it's very important that you take a TB preventive therapy that I'll speak about later, and ensure that you avoid getting tuberculosis. Other communities think that TB is witchcraft, and that's not true. TB is passed from one person to another through the air. It's an airborne disease. When you cough, sneeze, laugh, or talk, you could spread this germ from one person to another. Now, TB communities also think TB is hereditary. Do you think it's hereditary? No, it is not passed in the DNA. However, the reason why people tend to think that TB is hereditary is because most often people within the same household sit together to share a meal, to pray, to have fellowship together, to have discussions together as a family. And therefore, what happens? I talk to you, we are singing together, we are having discussions, and we are making merry together. And what happens is that every time I speak or talk or laugh or sneeze, I'm likely to pass this bacteria from myself to another person. And if we are living within the same household, we are likely to be sharing a lot of things together, including the air that is circulating. Our ventilation may not be adequate. Therefore, this air is circulating quite much within our house, and therefore, people within the same household end up getting TB. However, it is not hereditary. It's just on the mere fact that TB is airborne and can be passed from one person to another through the air. You don't get TB by sharing utensils as well. TB is airborne, remember, so you don't have to be afraid to share utensils with someone who has TB. It would be very important, actually, to support someone who has TB to ensure that they don't feel stigmatized during the period they're on treatment. Next, we can speak about prevention of tuberculosis. How do we prevent tuberculosis? Largely, when a child is born, we give what we call the BCG vaccine at birth. This BCG vaccine protects a child from getting tuberculosis at that early point in life. And why? It's because their immunity is quite weakened. So it's very important to cover them with that vaccine until they are of age where their immunity is quite strong and it can fight on itself. The other bit, and which is largely very important, is to ensure that we are all screened for TB. And screening actually does not require testing. You just need to ask yourself a few questions. Is that cough you are having TB? Is that symptom you are having TB? Are those drenching night sweats TB? It could actually be TB. So one very important thing then you should do is to visit your nearest facility, health facility, and be able to be screened for TB. If they screen you positive for TB and they think that your symptoms actually could be TB, you will be tested for TB. And if you're diagnosed with TB, you will also be put on TB treatment. But the most easy way to prevent TB is ensuring that we have adequate infection prevention control measures, or what we call the IPC measures. And these things are inexpensive. They're the things that are within our reach, including having open windows, quite enough and adequate ventilation, be it in a matatu, be it in a classroom, be it at your workplace. Please be an advocate of opening windows near you. I know most of you are now checking to see if windows are open. Yes, luckily they are open. So that's one of the most inexpensive way in which we can prevent TB. So what can we do? What can the church do? At the very least, we can continue to create awareness as part of TB control activities. When we create awareness about TB, it means that people get to know the signs and symptoms of TB so that they seek care. People also know where to seek care. In any public facility that is near you, you can get TB screening. They also can offer diagnosis. In the event that they are not able to test for TB at that place, they will ensure that you're linked to a testing facility where you can be tested for TB. The Ministry of Health is also partnering with the private facilities so that you're able to get screened and tested for TB within the private facilities near us. It is also important that as a church and community, we support those people who have TB. One, to be able to adhere to treatment, to avoid discrimination and stigma. A lot of time, and what most TB patients suffer is stigma or discrimination because they have TB. We can support them through prayers, through visits, through encouragement to be able to adhere to treatment and ensure they complete their course of treatment. But least most innovative way is to ensure then we incorporate infection control mechanisms within our workplaces, within our homes, within our schools, our classes. We ensure that there is adequate ventilation or advocate for, at the very least, infection prevention within the areas where you are, where you're working, where you're living, so that we ensure that all these people have, everyone at large has access to free circulating air that ends up reducing the transmission of TB within our communities. I'd want to leave you with 3 things that I hope from today you don't forget, is that TB is preventable, it is treatable, and it is curable. Mambo ni matatu. TB is preventable, it is treatable, and it is curable. Thank you, and God bless you all.
As our journey comes to a close, we are reminded of the power of knowledge and the importance of spreading awareness. Thank you for joining us today as we explore the myths, truth, and the preventive measures surrounding tuberculosis. Together, we've taken a step towards a healthier, more informed future. Let us continue to seek knowledge, share wisdom, and embrace the journey of learning. Until next time, may God's blessings be upon you.